Today, as you can see from the tables, we're going to be playing the meta-detective game. So we'll be playing that to learn the meta programs. On your modeling project, at this time you should have a general flow chart, a flow diagram of the subject. Does everybody pretty much have that as your beginning place? So now it's time to interview. So at lunch or at breakfast or at dinner or after hours in the evening, I would encourage you to aim for 3 to 5 people to interview. 3 to 5. That gives you several different strategies for whatever it is that you're going after. So as you begin thinking about who to interview, you'll want to use your criteria. So what's your criteria? For instance, with resilience, your elicitation question will be something like, who has really been knocked down and you thought you were out of it? Financially, relationship-wise, health-wise. You were knocked down, but you're back. So that'll be something of your elicitation question. And then, but before you start interviewing, how long did it take you to get back? Because one criteria is in a timely manner. Because if it's not time, if it took years, you probably don't want to interview that person. So if you're writing, you might make yourself some notes. What's my criteria for the interview? So even with effective, so you may have some questions and conversation even before you start. If it's effective selling, what's your criteria? Well, if your criteria is you made lots of money, you made lots of sales, I don't know if the person's an effective salesperson yet. What if they were in a market that was a hot market and they were mostly an order taker because people were lined up to buy? I don't know if that person has any sales skills yet. So I need to ask some more questions. So what did you sell? Was it an easy market to sell? Was it difficult to sell? Was it a small price item? Was it a big ticket item? These are going to be questions you want to have. If your criteria is, does a person know how to sell? Criteria for respectful communication. Anybody can communicate respectfully when the other person's being nice. Any fool can do that. So what's difficult is when someone is not being nice and you can stay respectful. So what is your, so that's the first thing. Before you do the interview, you get clear on your criteria. What's your criteria that you want to do that interview? You may want to do the opposite. Find someone who wasn't resilient. Find someone who can't sell. And interview that for the purpose of understanding what's stopping you, what's preventing you from having that experience. And then aim for 3 to 5 interviews in the next 3 or 4 days. So it's not like you have to do 3 today, but just in the next 2 or 3 days. And it doesn't have to be real formal. You can do it over dinner time, but have a piece of paper to take notes. Now, the next thing with taking notes and what you'll want to do with that is to begin thinking in terms of what information am I getting that confirms what I've already got, and what information, I don't know where to put that. So what I do with a flow chart is I make a little cloud. And in that little cloud, I'll put that information. 2 or 3 words that tell me this information goes somewhere. I don't know where it goes yet. I don't know which stage it goes in. But here's the information. Somehow I need to put it in. And my flow chart right now does not anticipate that or have that. As you gather that information, here's some distinctions to make. Is this information, is it critical, essential, necessary, or is it peripheral? If it's peripheral, is it idiosyncratic to this person? If it's peripheral, is it enhancing? because that might make the model richer, even though it's not necessary. So here's a distinction: what's necessary and what's peripheral. And that helps you to also identify whether it is part of the bare bones of the structure of that experience, or whether it is idiosyncratic to that one person. And so maybe putting it in a cloud, and then when you do another interview, are you seeing it again? So now you're beginning to test your flow chart. You're beginning to test the information that you have, the stages that you have, against incoming information. What you've done so far is design and anticipate and use your own experience to think about selling or communicating or healthy physical well-being. You've used your experiences with that. Now you're getting information from outside that may confirm it, and that may not confirm it. So one of the key things is, don't let the confirmation bias blind you. I'm only looking for information that will confirm what I already know, because then you won't learn anything new. And so, as you set a frame and your own state when you get that information, am I hearing something that I don't know where to put it? And so just put it in that little cloud and wait and see where it could go. So in your other manual, step number 2, some questions, so you can look at this later. It's page 30. What am I missing? This is in the old manual, the one we used yesterday, the modeling. So what am I missing? So if you plant that question in, what am I missing? What else is there? What are my blind spots? What context or environment anchors or context would be involved? And so we've got several other questions. As you now start interviewing, gathering information to test, and that would be the attitude. I'm going to test what I've got so far. I don't know if it's right. It may not be. So having that openness to, it could be wrong, I want to correct it, I want to test it with interviewing. So in the next 3 days, any questions that come up as you do that, feel free, especially in the morning when we get started, or in the evening when we end, questions about interviewing and gathering new information and putting it into the model that you've been creating so far. Make sense? How's everybody doing on your gathering that information and creating your basic model that you're starting with? You always have to start with something, and that's why this is called initial model in mind. So you're starting with something, and now you're going to test it and refine it and start changing it and cleaning it up and getting it so that new information comes in. Any questions about that? Okay, one question.
Can we interview someone directly as experiencing, or is it also okay if somebody knows of someone?
Well, that makes it, that's not going to be clean information, because now it's secondhand information, and it may be more hearsay than, And when you interview, be sure to induce them into state, calibrate, make it safe for them so that they speak from their experience rather than just talk about it. Because that would be hearsay experience, that hearsay information. The more they go into state, when was it that you did that selling? Who did you sell it to?
Related to that, if we listen to interviews of experts and athletes that have experienced something and they're interviewed in a podcast or...
So you got two problems there. They may be in state, they may not be in state. And the questions being asked them may not be the question you would want to ask them to find out.
That's
where...
Filter it out, probably.
Yes.
Filter out some of the information according to your research?
Yeah, for what we're doing here, your ability to interview someone, put them in state, and help to gather that information is the skill we want you to develop. So at this point, I wouldn't do that at all. And there's plenty of people in this room that have plenty of experiences and resources to tap into. Okay. So meta programs. So in this manual, as we get started, and somebody back at that table, does somebody have my manual? This is not my manual. Well, that's my other manual. That's the modeling manual. So I'll switch you.
You got mine.
So make sure you have your name on it. Meta programs. In ACMC, we study meta programs a little bit. And so we spend maybe 1 hour, 3 different days, just picking up some of the meta programs. And we spend a little bit of time with our definitions, and that's what we want to start with this morning to really understand what meta programs are. So you know what a program is. In fact, with your modeling project, you're creating a program, a resilient program, eating healthy program, a wellness program, a functioning with groups effectively program. So that's a content program. So a program is a habitual, disciplined, systematic way of doing something. Do you have a typing program inside your neurology? Do you have a driving program? So that's content. So a meta program is a program about all programs. So it's a habitual, disciplined, systematic, regular way of thinking. So that's what a meta program is. It's a way of thinking, and it's a way of thinking that governs our thinking. So it's both a strength. I can think in that way. I can see things optimistically. I can see opportunities if I have the optimistic meta program. Let me point one of the pages here, because we'll keep going back to it over and over. So let me point it out right now. We've got the list of meta programs on, we have the diagram somewhere. So 12. So it looks like this, page 12. So number 6 in the first column, number 6, is the meta program that everybody knows, optimistic, pessimistic. I see the world, as I move through the world, I see the world as it's half full, optimistic. I move through the world, I see the glass and it's half empty. So it's the same data, it's the same information. The liquid in the glass is at a certain level, but I see it optimistically, I see it pessimistically. So half full, half empty. So it's a way of seeing. And whatever the way of seeing, either way, is a strength. Because now I can see opportunities. Now I can see challenges and difficulties, things I'm going to have to deal with. So the meta program is, for the most part, 2 sides of seeing the same thing. And when you have both, you have a wiser perspective. So one definition of wisdom would be the flexibility to look at it this way, to look at it that way. Because now I've got multiple perspectives instead of a singular perspective. The singular perspective will create focus and direction and a skill, a way of seeing, a perception, and sometimes a towering strength. So if it's extreme. So some meta programs in some of us are extreme. We call it a driver. So it's extreme. I see opportunities everywhere. I can't. And when you have an extreme one, usually the backside is really shadowed. And in fact, you can't even go there because this is so extreme. So it's your towering strength and it's your blind spot. So many personality blind spots is the backside of the driving meta-program. So strength and shadow side. As we look at each meta-program and as you identify, where do I fall? Our task is not to change it, but to expand it. So if you're over-optimistic, well, there's times and places that could be really useful. And there's times and places where that could really not be useful. So having the ability to switch your glasses, switch the lens, switch the prescription, and see it the other way, balances off and creates that multiple perspective. So that's what we mean by the meta program. So meta programs are not good or bad, right or wrong, moral or immoral. They're just different ways of perceiving. And so as we balance them, and that's what we want to do, to have a wider spread between them, and to recognize them. Now, because meta-programs tells you how to see, how you see defines your personality. How you see the world, how you think, defines, informs, governs your personality. That's why meta-programs are often confused with personality. So here's a word, personality. Now in the meta model, what kind of word is that? Nominalization. So personality is not a thing, because you can't put that in a wheelbarrow, can't put that up on the chair, so it's not a thing, it's a process. So if we take it back to the verb, personality, person, because the ality is a function. So how do you do your person? How are you a person in perceiving, thinking, feeling, speaking, acting? So when we take it back to the verb, it's how you experience your person, present your person, do your person. Because when it comes to person, it's thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, relating, connecting. So personality now becomes demystified, and it becomes a set of processes, which is why on page 12, when we have this, we've got the meta-programs that govern the way you think and process information, the way you emote and feel and use your feeling competencies, the way you make choices to connect, choices to speak, choices to act, and then some of the semantic meta-programs, the concepts that's driving you. So this breaks down and demystifies personality. So meta-program model is the very opposite of a typology. So typology began with the ancient Greeks. It may have began earlier than that, as people are trying to figure out people. And as they're trying to figure out people, the Greeks came up with the 4 temperaments, the 4 tempers, the 4 colors. You know, some people are just dark. They just have a dark perception. Some people are emotional and they're red. And so that's how they started. And they said, you're that type. You're that kind. And typology has the assumption that if that's the type you are, then you're that type and you're not going to change. You may put on some little adjustments, but you're that type. So Myers-Briggs is typology. Taylor-Johnson is typology. The Enneagram is typology. The Minnesota multiple phasic personality type is typology. So almost everything in psychology is typology. So meta-programs is the very opposite. You're not that type. That's how you're operating. That's how you're functioning. That's what's been habituated. You've learned to be and do your behavior, your personality that way. So here's a big difference, and it's why I encourage the neurosemantic trainers not to use those typologies in organizations and things, because actually the presupposition is you're that way, we can make some adjustments for you, but you really can't transform. And you don't have that much flexibility with choices. So how does that settle? So and I've got training in some of those, Taylor Johnson, Myers-Briggs, the DISC, some of these. So sometimes you get training in it, and it's like it's really hard to give up that baby. Well, you don't have to give it up. I mean, those will be meta-programs. In fact, several of the Myers-Briggs distinctions that came from Carl Jung are meta-programs that Wyatt Woodsmull put into the NLP meta-programs. Questions or comments about that? Because that's kind of a real fundamental foundation of meta-programs. Meta-programs is process of how we experience our personality, and not personality typology. Okay, so we'll get...
Morning, Michael. Morning, everyone. This is Jay. I'd just like to ask Michael about the origin of meta programs. So we have so many.
Yeah.
How did it get to be that many?
Okay.
Who came up with it?
Okay, so we do have a line in here somewhere. See if I can find the question on the source of meta-programs. The meta-programs were developed originally by Leslie Cameron Bandler. And Leslie came up with the original meta-programs because she was doing classic NLP. And as she was doing classic NLP, she found that there were some of the patterns that got interfered with. If somebody sees that paragraph on the source, 14. So page 14, yeah, these are where the questions are. The second paragraph. And so I don't have Leslie mentioned there, but the sources is Leslie Cameron. So if you think about meta-programs, we have a meta-program that we'll be covering, number 20, and it's about associating, stepping in an experience and experiencing it, or stepping out and not experiencing it directly, but experiencing something about it, either observing or something else. So stepping in, stepping out. And if a person is running the movie Rewind and trying to get the emotional charge and phobia out of the body, and they're making a picture of it, and even if they put the picture up there away, but they haven't really stepped out of the experience. They're just putting the image up there, but they're still in the experience. Then that's supposed to create distance and distinction, so they're feeling something different, but they're still in the experience. They've just put up the movie. And so now it's not going to work. So that meta-program can interfere with that pattern. And that's what Leslie found, that some of the patterns sometimes didn't work. How come? What other factor, what other invisible structural factor is going on that somehow the pattern, the steps, did not facilitate in this person? So the meta-program stopped it. So she started noticing every time she was failing with a client, with a pattern, and then asking, okay, what invisible thing is going on? And that's where the meta-programs came. And she came up with 6 or 7, I think originally. She and Richard started looking for what doesn't work and what can make something not work. I think the list eventually got to about 12 or 13, and then that was the original list. And Roger Bailey from Texas, Dallas, Texas, he put them together in the lab profile. So in the back of the Figuring Out People book, I put the lab profile in there with the basic 14, which we're going to start, we're not going to start with 14, we're going to start with 10 today, the most basic ones. And then And then, so when Bob and I sat down in 1997, because my background in cognitive psychology and having seen many distinctions of frames, I started adding all of these to the dismay of some people. Now, in terms of source, since we're on page 14 and that second paragraph, they arise, the meta-programs arise both from nature and nurture, from natural dispositions and tendencies, and from learning experiences. So even though they're not personality, we know that we're all different, and we're wired different. And this is where Howard Gardner's 8 intelligences is a useful model. Some people are just wired for athletics. Some people are just wired for music. They have a disposition for mathematics. They have a disposition for people. They have a disposition for reflection, intra-psychic. So we know that that our brains are different, our nervous systems are different, and that we are predisposed and have tendencies toward. But the tendency doesn't mean fulfillment, because if you're not in an environment that will satisfy it, it'll be a potential untapped. So while there's tendencies and dispositions, then there's the learning environment. Meta-programs, as we experience them, rise from the solidification of meta-states. So generally speaking, when I'm in a primary state and I access another state, I access joy. If I access joy a lot or optimism a lot, the tendency will be for me now to have a program for seeing everything in a happy, joyful, optimistic way. So that meta-stating process is what creates the meta-programs. And that's how it gets habituated. So it becomes solidified or integrated from the meta-state. They begin as learned, taught, or coached ways of thinking, sorting, perceiving, and eventually becomes a mental program for that. And then they become thinking and conceptualizing that has gotten in our eyes. So then our next definition of a meta-program is a perceptual filter. It's like glasses. You know, I got dark glasses, I got golden glasses, I've got green glasses, I've got blue glasses. I see the world tinted in this way or that way. So it's a perceptual filter. Now the interesting thing is, when you have glasses on, most of us who wear glasses, there's been times when we were looking around for our glasses. And then somebody says, well, it's on your face. Oh. Because we get so used to them, we don't see them. We see through them, and we don't see them. And the same thing would be with contact lens, that we see through them. Same thing with meta-programs. It's hard to see them in yourself. So it takes some awareness to step back to recognize the perceptual lens. So we see through them. Some more things about meta-programs, the third one there. Meta-programs are on continuums. So we're gonna constantly be looking at, the majority of them are polar opposites. Matching, mismatching. Options, procedures. Global, specific. So most of them are on a continuum. Because they're on a continuum and because they're polar opposites, how far on one side or how far on the other side, how extreme they are, is going to be defining the strength of a meta-program in you. So when it's really far, we call that a driver. And when it's really far and there's not much range, if it's far and you got plenty of range, then it's not going to be a driver. So that's our definition of a driver and why we will be looking at these continuums. So that's that next paragraph. The fourth one there, aren't meta-programs context dependent? And the answer is definitely yes. So it all depends on the context. So this also shows the flexibility that is not about personality, It's as much about context as it is about anything else. So one of the ways to start expanding your meta program is to ask the context question. Where am I global? Where am I detailed? Where, in what context, what situation do I match whatever's going on, and in which ones do I mismatch? Because most of us will have that. If there's just almost no place that you do the opposite, then that would also define a driver. And yet for most of us, there's not going to be many places like that. So meta programs shift and change depending on context. This gives us the ability to operate with different meta programs in different contexts, environments, situations. And this explains why NLP should not be used or confused with personality traits that defines what a person is. They're not written in stone. They are descriptive of how we behave. Mental behavior, perceptual behavior, and so not traits. Can we change meta programs? And the answer there is yes, you bet. You could actually change it. Now, except for one or two, that's never recommended. There are a couple meta programs that there are places where you don't want to be there most of the time. So I would change that one. And there's a couple that we're born with one, and we moved. Hopefully, we change and move to the other one. We're all born external reference, and then moving to internal reference with external check is the ideal place. There's only a couple of them like that there's an ideal place. So the degree of changeability depends on several factors: your beliefs about changing them, your desire and motivation to change them, your willingness to give the change process a chance, the skill of the person working with you to facilitate the change, the patterns that you use to bring about the change. So lots of different conditions on the process of changing or expanding the meta program. And the last one there, meta programs are not things, they're processes. So it's what we're doing and how we're functioning. And so even the language that we're going to be using in a few minutes, global specific, and we'll talk, and sometimes the talk sounds like, well, that's what I am. But that's just the problem of English language, making normalizations and making it sound static when it's not. The last question there is, can we use meta programs to profile? So here's a big, one of the big values of meta programs. You can profile people. You can profile experiences. So you can profile the job. This job of being on the front counter in the hotel or in the restaurant or in the printing company, this frontline job at the front desk, what kind of meta programs would this job best be suited by? Well, probably attention to others, sorting for people. And so there'd be several meta programs matching. There'd be several meta programs. You could profile that job. This job is best done with these meta programs. Now, who's got these meta programs? Naturally. So finding the right person for the job, because you get someone who doesn't have those meta programs, and then stepping into that job is going to feel real uncomfortable, stressful, not me. Playing that role is going to be much more challenging. So we can profile a job, an activity, an experience, and we can profile a person. How you generally operate and behave up till now is this way, and therefore what's going to really fit for you is this, and what's going to be a real challenge and a step up will be something else. So the profiling of meta programs.
Okay, Vijay?
Good morning. My question is around the nature and nurture.
Okay.
So when we solidify a meta state into a meta program. That would be an example of the nurturing meta program.
Yeah.
In the nature meta program, you mentioned, you gave one example of we're all born external reference.
Yeah.
And then we would be nurtured to a certain level of how we live that way. Are there other, are all of these 60, are they all present in a nature, or is nature just a very selected few? One of the questions I get very often and I get pushback on is saying, well, no, I have 2 kids and they're just different. They're just born that way. Right. And they list all of the different ways their children are different. So how many or how much of these meta programs can be in nature versus, most can be nurtured?
Now, if I could answer that question, I could be on the celebrity route, because the answer is I don't know. We know that some of these meta programs, like screening, non-screening, is based heavily upon your neurology. So when you get to number 9, screening, same thing with stress 1. The stress 1 is that is based upon your nervous system, the sensitivity versus the robustness of your nervous system. So when we get to the stress 1, type A, type B, personality types responding in stress. So that's really driven by neurology. So your neurology plays a more highly determinative role there. Now, we're guessing that neurology plays a role. It's not going to be as strong as those 2, but it's going to play a pretty strong role in some others, maybe introvert, extrovert, maybe, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, number 1. And we'll mention that as we go through, but the real answer, we don't know how, and we don't know how to measure how much neurology plays a role, because it is the same neurology that we use to think. Because you think inside your nervous systems, and with all your nervous systems, and so the brain is connected to all of that. So it's the same nervous system that is creating all the thinking and cognition and feeling. So separating it is really challenging.
Okay.
The first 2 or 3 pages in your manual gives you some other background context information. See, a couple things to highlight without going through all those pages. On page 5, 3rd paragraph, and then toward the bottom of the 3rd paragraph, the meta-program meta-programs are the hidden, behind-the-scenes structure, which actually controls what and how the person sees things. So here's a definition. It's the behind the curtain, behind the background. It's hidden. It's invisible until you learn to see it. So that's one of our descriptions of a meta-program. On page 6, at the very bottom of the page, and the 2nd paragraph up, meta-programs form the foundational structure, meta-states forms the foundational structure of meta-programs. Meta-programs are the results of meta-stating. They are meta-states that they have so habituated that they've coalesced into muscle and have therefore gotten into the eyes as perceptual lens. So just some sentences here, descriptions of what we're talking about, and highlighting the key points. On page 9, the 2nd paragraph under the magic of meta-programs, 2nd paragraph, page 9, because meta-programs describes one of the hidden processes or the dynamic structures in how we attend to things, focus our perceptions, filter our lens of our mental sight, then detecting them, recognizing them, and using these meta-programs offers a yellow brick road into human reality. So in terms of modeling, This is going to give us a just a quick access path, straight path into human reality, because there are these dynamic structures. Even writing the word dynamic structure, you got a paradox there. Your structure, but it's dynamic. And so it takes a while to think in terms of processes, that these are always fluid and moving and dynamic, and yet there are these alive processes behind the scenes that's actually governing things, to how we attend and focus and sort on things. So there is structure to how we pay attention. And so as you pay attention to any single person, calibrate to them, profile them, you'll discover their patterns of attention, their patterns of perceiving, and now you've found a meta-program. At the bottom of page 9, the second paragraph to the bottom, any meta-program that a person uses in a wrong context will work against that person or against being able to achieve some outcome. When that happens, it becomes unecological. So there are meta-programs that fit certain places, and there's meta-programs that don't fit. And so it's not that it's wrong, it's just it doesn't fit, it doesn't work there. And in that case, it's not going to be ecological. It's not going to be healthy for your system to use that meta-program in that way, no matter how much it is your darling meta-program. On page 10, the fourth paragraph, any thinking pattern as a structured way of thinking or perceiving can become a meta-program. All a person has to do is to think that way long enough, often enough, intense enough, and it'll become a meta-program. As we reflexively bring that kind of awareness to ourselves, it becomes a perceptual filter. Take the childish thinking of entitlement. It's mine, you owe me, I deserve whatever I want. Repeat that often enough, and eventually it could become a person's meta-program. Do you know anyone who walks through life with that way of perceiving? So in meta-programs, we call that the under-responsible filter. So any way of thinking, this is where these 60 is not exhaustive. There's more. And there can be some real unique ones that a certain person has taken a way of thinking, and they've just repeated in that way of thinking, and it operates as if it's a meta-program. So it's that habituation, it's that regularity of a way of thinking that locks it in, and it becomes a filter. So those are some key points as in those earlier ones. So now let me talk about the columns and why we put them in this way. The first column is the most obvious column. These meta-programs seem to control thinking. And so the cognitive meta-programs, the thinking meta-programs, and so we've got a lot in column 1, and these will be ones that will probably be most familiar to you in column 1, the thinking ones. And so it governs the way we think. There's emotional meta-programs. It's like there's a filter on the way I emote. Now, it'll come from the thinking ones, but it'll have its own uniqueness. And so column 2 are the emotional meta-programs, the filters that govern the attention of our emotions, the direction of our emotions, what our emotions are sorting for, paying attention to, getting activated to. So emotional meta-programs. And while we separate thinking and feeling, They're part of the same system. Then conation is the Old English word for choice, conation. And so the three faculties of man in the 18th, 19th century, read any philosophical book, or once psychology became a field, a psychology book, and it was always said three faculties: thinking, feeling, choosing, conation. So we have a number of ones that govern how we make choices. So when I choose, do I choose what I want, or do I choose what I don't want? So toward and away from. Do I choose from the perspective of, and my choice is, what alternatives do I have, options, or do I choose what's the right way? I want to do it right. So choice meta-programs, so we have that column. Then there are meta-programs that are made out of concepts. Take any concept and think of things with that concept over and over and over, and it becomes a semantic or conceptual meta-program. So in that column, we got things about self, we got things about responsibility, morality, we got time. So we got these concepts that create filters. So I see the world from that concept. And once again, we put number 60 as just the catch-all one. Because anything you value, anything you say that's important, becomes a meta-program. So we could have a whole list under that fourth column of concepts that become meta-programs. Take the concept of revenge. So if you believe in revenge, if you believe eye for eye, tooth for tooth, arm for arm, most ancient societies believe that. This is the way you manage things. If you kill someone, then you get killed. If you cut off their arm, you cut their arm. If you take their cow, we take their cow. So revenge, I get back and get even. Well, if you think that way, and then you bring that, it's going to create what's going to operate as a meta-program, and it's going to create a revengeful person. So any concept can do that. And it can be a negative one like that, or it can be a positive one. So, so concepts of the dignity, the sacredness of life, of man, could be a concept that now operates like a meta-program. So there's more than these 60. And we just, in fact, I started making a list for our next edition a number of years ago, and I've got another 10 that we'll add to the book, but it's like, where do you stop on meta-programs? So that's the 4 columns. Does that make sense? Okay. So other questions about the meta-programs as we look at them?
Okay.
So can you have 2 meta-programs that come together to produce another one?
Okay, 2 meta-programs that come together to produce another one. Okay, tell me more what you're thinking. Do you have any kind of example in mind?
Mismatching and either-or thinking.
Oh, yeah,
If that comes together, then that produces a new...
Well, it may not produce a new one, but it creates a certain complex response. And so a number of the meta-programs fit together. So detailing and procedure fit together. Options and global fit together. And when you have those opposite in the same person, global procedure, it's kind of weird. And so we'll look at that to some extent. I've got some of that kind of interplay of meta-programs in the back of Figuring Out People, a little bit. They don't so much create a new meta-program or a Gestalt meta-program, it's just bringing in different perceptions at the same time. Oftentimes because now we've got multiple perspectives, oftentimes it can create a wiser perspective or a more thorough one in different ways. Okay, so one more question.
2 more questions. Okay, we'll go.
So I went through I'm not sure should I call it personality or something. It's called Herman Brain's Dominance Indicator. So they talk about left brain, right brains, and then upper brains, the bottom of the brain and all that. So this is how people, why some people, they have the genius of creativity. Some people, they have the genius of detail, analytical, and being organized. So how does this work? Is this
so that was real popular in the 1960s. That was real popular in the 1970s. And then the neurosciences have shown that it's just not so. In fact, there's so much fluidity in the 2 hemispheres. If your left hemisphere is damaged and you have problems with language, your right hemisphere will take over. So it was a nice, simple model. Right hemisphere, left hemisphere, creative people, analytical people. If only it was that simple. It's not. So a lot of that stuff that was popular in the 60s, 70s about that, it's just not, the neuroscience, we know that's not so. And so trying to create personality types, which is what they were trying to do, it's just not. It's holistic. And the right hemisphere does as much on language as the left hemisphere. And it encodes a different kind of language. It encodes things you memorize, and music, and poems, and other kinds of language. And if the left is damaged with a lesion or something, the right will take over and run what the left used to do. So it's not so cut and dried as we thought when the first people in the neurosciences were dealing with it. So just like every field, there's all kinds of myths that come out of the development of field. In the 1950s, Penfield was one of the first neurosciences to work on the human brain. He would open up the brain, put electric probes in different places, and the person, he would stimulate, and the person would have this memory and go into it, and they could smell the fire, or they could, whatever the memory was about. And so his conclusion, he said, everything you've ever experienced is in there. It's encoded. It's in there if you could just access it. And so he drew the conclusion, everything is in there. Well, we know so much better now that everything is not in there. Number one, you may not have even been very present when things happen. So the encoding is depending upon how present you were. Secondly, it keeps changing. It keeps altering. You keep forgetting. And it's not in there anywhere. And so what we now know on neuroscience is a whole lot more than some of those first jumping to conclusions that some of the people did. And so the people who, there's some new age people who think everything is in there, so we just got to access it. But it's just not like that. You've got a good forgetter. And thank God you got a good forgetter, because there's things to forget.
Another question is for those autistic children, so they don't speak much, right? They can be hyperactive. But yes, they have a different genius, like they're able to draw very well. So they use another way to express themselves. Would that be part of the meta program?
No. There's lots of studies on autism and the different degrees of autism, the different kinds of autism. I mean, there's so many. And really, we still don't understand it that fully. What's driving it, what causes it, what activates it. But it's not a meta program. A meta program is a learned perceptual way that is now governing that. And there's just so many other factors that go involved with it, with autism. So, one last question.
Yes. Michael, this is just a simple question. I just wanted to know if there is any material or any activities that are recommended to teach someone how to move from one end of the spectrum to another end of a meta program?
Well, so have you gone through ACMC? Okay, so ACMC Day 5, the expanding meta programs pattern.
Is there any other material that we can use?
Yeah, but that's the best. Now, the other thing about a meta program is a question. So I started out 4 days ago by saying if there's 3 meta programs to be aware of, because in the context of learning something brand new, they will stop you. They will interfere. And then I suggested a question. So if you're global, you're not going to see the details, and mastery's in the details. So there's a question. What am I missing? When you ask someone, so what are you missing? And then they start, that question will drive them over to the other side, and they'll start looking. And it's amazing what will happen when you start looking. You'll start seeing. We should have a t-shirt of that. It's amazing what happens when you start looking, you can see. And so one of the greatest ways to invite people to expand their meta program is ask them the question that they cannot answer. And you can even tease them. I know you can't answer this. What are you missing? I know you can't answer this. What is the same as what you already know? For the mismatcher. So the great, you don't have to go read literature. I mean, it's just, what is the question that would take you to the other side? That sounds like a good title for a book. The question that takes you to the other side.
Please write it. I will buy that book.
One more question.
Good morning, Michael. I think our question comes from the fact that there are 60 meta programs, and the question on the other side, especially if you belong to one side, escapes us.
Yeah, because it's the blind spot.
Right.
If it's a driver.
Is there a list that has all the questions on each side that drives you to the other side?
I think so. I think as we go through here, you're going to find a lot of these questions.
Yes, but some you say so easily, like if you're global,
right.
What's the other one? What are you missing?
What are you
so
missing?
those easy questions. And is there a way to, I've read it says, don't overwhelm yourself with the 60 meta programs and just learn one at a time.
Yeah.
Is there like a sequence, which ones, procedural, which ones to study first?
That was a procedural question.